it will confine you over time, and eventually you will crack because your ideas aren't worldly and therefore are not able to adapt and scale to the changing environment. Everything that's outside of that, which we do in a physical, humanistic way, we have to learn. So the most powerful words are, I do not know, because that shows you've got potential to learn. That shows that you're willing to learn. There's a balance you need to strike. And that the bamboo principle is saying, actually, you know what? Start to recognize that and recognize when you need to yield and when you need to aggress.
Welcome everybody to another Martial Mind Power podcast. I'm Jatinder with Sifu Lak, and we're going to be sharing another session of wisdom bombs. And Sifu Lak, how are you doing?
Very well, thank you. Very well.
Cool. And we're going to be going back to the book, The Art of Thinking Without Thinking, to see the next topic that we're going to speak about. So as we do, normally, we're just going to pick a random moment like here and righty. So we have the bamboo principle, and that is page 190.
90, yeah. Okay. All right. So without reading into it, I was going to start off by asking you, what do you think it means?
What do you think it means? Yeah. So when I hear about the bamboo...
What's coming to you without you thinking?
So thinking without thinking, the first thing that pops into my head is just Bruce Lee going up the pagoda, and he comes across the guy with the bamboo stick as part of the weapons, right? So that's where my mind went first when you said bamboo stick. I went back to that, and then my brain's gone into the whole kind of bamboo. What was the whole point of that? What was Bruce Lee doing in regards to that? And I think he was talking about how it's such a flexible object, but it can whip with such a immense power when it's done in a correct way. So the bamboo principle is probably going to be something along the lines of that, but how we relate to it to real life, Sifu Lak is going to go into it in a lot more depth. So I'm on the right tracks with this one, Lax.
Yeah, you are. Okay, so the bamboo principle is actually it's an old Chinese philosophy, really. And it comes from Chinese martial arts. And the idea is the bamboo is a flexible wood. Okay, so when there's strong winds and so on, it flexes. Unlike a rigid oak tree, right? When it's really windy, an oak tree will crack and split. Okay. And the idea behind the bamboo principle is really trying to help us understand that in neuroscience, right? There's this concept of neuroelasticity and neuroplasticity. Okay, and they kind of mean the same thing in a way. And for all your neuroscientists out there, forgive me if I'm wrong, but the idea is this ability to for your mind to adapt and grow in an elastic manner, right? So, in other words, your mind has a natural ability to be flexible, okay, like the bamboo, right? But if you are so rigid and boxed in with your ideas, that's like voguing there for a second, right? If you're so rigid and boxed in with your ideas, then it will confine you over time, and eventually you will crack because your ideas aren't worldly and therefore are not able to adapt and scale to the changing environment. Because everything in life changes. As I say, the only constant in life is change. So if change is imminent, then we also are changing. And therefore, if we are also changing, our ideas, our thoughts, our concepts, our belief systems have to change as we learn and grow, right? So this is the idea. Now, the bamboo principle in a Jeet Kune Do application comes from the idea that, I mean, you've heard Bruce talk about this concept that when your opponent is being aggressive, you can, if you've got one aggressive force against another aggressive force and they're just butting heads, over time both parties are going to get hurt, damaged, fatigued, bruised, battered, broken, and so on. And it's not sustainable, right? Now, this is in a combat, right? Now, imagine if you're doing that in a work environment, you're constantly, banging and butting heads with a colleague, or in a relationship, you're constantly banging and butting heads with a partner or a family member or a housemate, right? For instance, right? Over time, you're going to get fatigued. You're going to become drained of energy, right? And you're going to feel battered and bruised, right? And what's the point? And maybe even broken, but what's the point of that, right? The idea is when you've got an aggressive force, you have to yield, okay? Yield at times. And when your opponent yields, sometimes you have to be aggressive, right? So this is where you've got the bamboo principle, okay? Where the bamboo is bending in the wind, okay? Now, before, we go into, actual read the koan, right? Which kind of goes into this a bit more and explains that in Bruce Lee's own words, this whole idea is from a combative standpoint, looks at the physical attributes of how to interact and have that dynamic interplay with you and your opponent. Okay, if I was to use that. Okay, but life, right, is not you and your opponent, is you and another fellow human being, another fellow spiritual being in a human journey, right? Which means that we have to learn to coexist, right? We have to learn to maintain a symbiosis, a harmony, right? And respect one another's spaces, and to have this way of coexisting one another without have a constant conflict, okay? And we all know somebody that always has fights, always has conflicts, always got issues, always got some kind of problem in their life. Why? Because their attitude is always to fight, always to aggress. Solution to everything is aggress, right? And we also know somebody in our lives that's always yielding, compromising, giving in, what's the word?
Submissive.
Accommodating,
Yep.
accommodating everybody else. Guess what? They always get walked over. They all get trodden over, right? They get trampled over. These guys put up a fight and they just end up getting fatigued and not getting anywhere in life. They both suffer, right? This is the yielder. This is the aggressor. Okay. Now the bamboo principle is saying, actually, do you know what? Hey, yielder, get up. Don't lie down like a doormat so people can walk over you. Get up, right? And sometimes doesn't mean you have to be aggressive, but you can learn to say no. Okay. For that person, no is being aggressive. Yeah. Right. And then you got the aggressive person that's always fighting. And sometimes, what we're trying to say to that person is it's okay to compromise, to accept what the other person is saying. You're not always right. And therefore that doesn't make you wrong, but it just means that, you are willing to listen to somebody else. So all of a sudden you start to see that the law of yin and yang is what we're talking about here, is something that is a continuously moving dynamic interplay of both aggressive and yielding energies. And we need to understand that. And we need to work with that. And if you start to work with that, you will understand, sometimes a fight is not worth fighting, right? And sometimes just accommodating everybody's wishes is not worth accommodating everybody's wishes, because you just end up being left depleted, drained, and completely diluted at the end of it, right? So there's a balance you need to strike, and that the bamboo principle is saying, actually, you know what? Start to recognize that, and recognize when you need to yield and when you need to aggress, right? And when I say aggress doesn't mean you have to be violent about it, you have to be rude about it, you have to be obnoxious about it. It means that sometimes you need to apply energy, and sometimes you need to take energy away. Now, let me repeat that, because that's what it boils down to. Sometimes you need to apply energy, sometimes you need to remove energy, okay? That's what we're talking about. Aggression is applying energy, right? And yielding is taking energy away, okay? But you see how that works in the two sides. So from a martial way. Now, when I say martial way, I'm talking about using the martial arts principles, philosophies, and the spirit of martial art to live your best life. Okay, if we're going to bring it to that, okay, which is ultimately what it's about, living your best life, but not just for you, but for everyone in your life, because you don't live your life on your own. Otherwise, you'll be on a remote island on your own, on your Jack Jones, doing your own thing, and that'll drive people nuts, because we know how the pandemic worked out for people that were told to stay at home. People didn't like it, right? We live in a world where we've got almost 8 billion people now, and we have to learn to coexist. We have to learn to work with one another. We have to learn to play with one another, okay? And as a consequence, we have to learn when we need to apply energy, when we need to take that energy away, to maintain your energetic resources, so you use your energy wisely, and also so you can honor somebody else's energy, okay? Because if you're aggressing too much, or you're applying too much energy, right, and somebody else is applying too much energy, right, they won't match. You need to try and work with people, okay? Right, you need to do this dance, and life is a bit of a dance, okay? And sometimes we get it wrong. Sometimes we apply energy when somebody else is applying energy. Sometimes we yield and withdraw our energies when the other person is withdrawing energy, leaving a vacuous gap in between, right? Which means that people drift apart, right? And so it happens, okay? And it just depends. And it depends on, where do you want your energy to go? What is worthy of your energy, okay? What is worthy of your energy? Where do you want to spend your energy? Time rolls on, okay? It's going to keep rolling on until, from the moment you were born to the moment you die, okay? And everything else in between is a continuous movement forwards, outside of your control. You can't do nothing about it. Just let it roll, as they say, right? So time moves on, right? The only thing that you've got is energy, right? And you can think about energy as effort, right? As work, as in the way that you apply your physical, mental, emotional, spiritual faculties, right? To create something, to help something, whatever it is, to destroy something. I don't know, whatever your business is, right? Or whatever your career is, whatever way in which you survive within your life, right, and your livelihood and so on. So that's what it's all about. It's about the application or removal of energy.
No, that's fantastic. I mean, as you were speaking, I was just making some notes, and I'd written down dance and rapport, because I remember having a conversation about rapport, and they were talking about how it is, like you said, it's a dance. So as you were sharing about your dynamics with the other person, there is this element of a dance going on. It's like some matrix which is moving with how, the cycles or the vibration of the universe, the planet, whatever you want to call it, in relation and harmony with another person, and being able to adapt, essentially, isn't it, with what's going on? Because the interesting thing about that is that there's like what you said about you're either going to feel as if you're being taken with the wave,
Yeah.
or you're going to feel like a surfer to say you're riding the wave. You
Yeah.
know, the wave may not be controllable, but it depends on how you deal with that situation and scenario, which then boils down to the mindset element. And the other thing you were sharing about, the kind of extremes you were talking about, and you were talking about the yin yang, right? As people know, the good within the bad within the good, and I can't get it pointed properly on my chest, right? And how that's and how that's in continuous motion, and you can't separate the two. So there's always this kind of dynamic element of it. Just for anyone who's thinking, well, how can you can separate two or whatever? One of the examples people give you is that if you have a magnet, you can't have a one-sided magnet kind of thing. It will always have the opposite polarity to it, right? Even though a magnet might be shaped in one way, it's going to have a positive draw. One's going to have a negative side to it. And, if you go down to the atom level, your electrons, protons, neutrons, all that kind of stuff is based on that whole principle of polarity. So to see that dance taking place, to see the bamboo stick happening, you can see those in your environment and in your surroundings, right?
That's right. Do you know what? I actually drew a picture of this to kind of explain the interplay of the yin and the yang energies, and this is in the original Truth book, and this is in the Ultimate Potential chapter, which starts on page 75, Living Your Best Life, and on page 80 of that book there is a diagram of yin and yang interplay of energy, right? This is a pencil drawing that I did, and just kind of like, again, this is trying to match this up because it's a bit awkward when you do it on camera. So you see how, you've got, imagine this is like a full moon, right? It's completely bright. It starts to get darker, and then all of a sudden it becomes fully dark, right? So now it becomes like a new moon, and then it starts to become lighter, and then becomes a full moon again, right? So if you look at it kind of as if it was a moon, right? The key thing is the moon's always there, okay?
Yeah.
The moon doesn't disappear. It's always there. Just like you said, the magnet, it's got the positive and the negative poles on the magnet, right? And but the thing about magnet is it's static, okay? Whereas if you think about the moon, it hopefully helps you understand that the moon stays where it is. It's just that the light that's reflected on it, either it will illuminate the whole moon until it eventually wanes, right? So that it becomes fully shadowed, which is referred to as a new moon, and then it starts to wax again, right? Which means it starts to get brighter until it becomes a full moon again, right? And the yin yang energies are exactly like that, and but the moon's always there, and that's what you need to kind of keep in mind.
It's like like you said, the day and the night kind of element, right? So you got the day, the morning, sorry, you got the night, but they're all part of the day, and the complete day with the both sides.
Yeah, and that day is because you're on Mother Earth, right? The constant is Mother Earth, right?
Absolutely.
And it just so happens to be that, let's just say, you've got a UK type of day where half of the day is light, half of the day is night, right? So you notice how you've got that. But the other aspect kind of which we haven't really focused on is the oak tree, right? The rigid oak tree, which can crack. Okay, now we talked about opposing forces. When you got asserting energy or aggressive energies, as going up against one another, eventually you get fatigued and drained, and you feel like there's nothing left. Okay, and it will really kind of bring you down, drained, diluted, depressed, however you want to describe those emotions, but they're negative emotions, right? And the key thing with that is that the rigidity comes from could be a variety of sources, but egocentricity is one of the biggest. Okay, people generally do not want to change their belief systems or their ideas, or their position, because it can be, they in general, people fear that it will bear on them in a negative way. But the problem with that is, if you stay rigid, your point's going to be broken in the end, because there will be something that overrides that, something that will prove that wrong. I mean, science is based on hypotheses to try and either prove something that already exists, but you don't have scientific empirical evidence to show that. So that's what the whole study is there to prove, that something that you already know exists, but can be proven through empirical science and studies, scientific studies, or you're trying to discover something that hasn't been done before, in a whole new way, right? Through research and study and so on, and that's when you don't know, right? So which camp are you in? Are you in the camp that you're trying to discover something, right, which you don't know, or you do know about something, and therefore that's your position? So it really depends on the position in which you're coming from. But most importantly of all, the person that can accept that they did not know, is the one that's going to make the most growth. And I do not know is probably the most powerful statement any human being can make, because everything that we ever known in our human existence has been learnt. Okay, apart from those things that come through us, right? Again, we have to learn to connect and communicate with that, right? So that has to also be learned, even if we've got the gift of, say, channeling, mediumship, intuition, and whatever it might be, right? Even we have to cultivate that practice, right? But everything that's outside of that, which we do in a physical, humanistic way, we have to learn. So the most powerful words are, I do not know, because that shows you've got potential to learn. That shows that you're willing to learn. Okay. And in order to
just
learn,
to add to that, like, we were talking about the polar opposites, is that, there's a very, very powerful question as well. But the negative side of that is that if you believe that to be your reality, because if you get caught up in the I don't know, then your brain closes off to looking for new opportunities as well. So that's a interesting angle, because it's like almost a self-talk. Because I've been in a situation where I've spoken to somebody and you said something to them, and the response is, I don't know. And it's like, well, haven't you asked a different question to see how you could know, or what could be done differently in order to find out? So there's that element. If they get stuck in it, it can be a problem. But if they're open to it, like you said, if they're open to it, then you can have massive growth on that side.
So a long time ago, you told me a story about you asking a question to your teacher and how your teacher would respond. Do you want to share that?
Sorry, which one?
So a long time ago, you told me a story about when you would ask your teacher a question about something you didn't know.
Yeah. Absolutely. So
you want to share that?
Definitely. So when I was at uni, one of the supervisor I had for my dissertation, a very good lecture, probably one of the biggest lessons I learned in life, is that whenever I was doing any work and I didn't know the answer to something, the thing was, I don't know. And I would go up to her and say, I don't understand this. How does it work? What, I don't know. And she would turn around and say, well, what do you think? And I'll be like, I don't know. I'm asking you. What do you mean? She's like, well, what do you think? So she'll ask that 2 or 3 times before I actually register and think, okay, what do I think? And then I start to think about it. And she'll go into it again. What do you think? What do you think? And, ended up answering the question. And so this would happen. So every time I had a question, go up to her and say, well, what do you think? What do you think? I don't know. What do you think? until I got to a point where one day I was sitting at home doing my work and I thought, oh man, I don't know how this works. I need to find out. And I heard a voice in my head say, well, what do you think? And I thought, hang on a minute. Let me think about this. And I started thinking about the things and I ended up answering my own questions. And I think that was one of the most powerful gifts that somebody can give me, was the ability to say, well, hang on a minute. What do you think? You know?
So on that note, the reason I brought this story up, right, was you just said that I don't know is also giving up your power to not knowing something, and you're just saying, all right, I don't know. All right, I give up. Right. But actually, when I say that admitting you don't know something by saying I do not know should also be your impetus to know. Okay. Does that make sense? Right.
Absolutely.
So I'll say that once again, right? When you don't know something and you admit I do not know, that should be your trigger, your impetus to find out, so that
exactly.
Yeah. And that takes humility, first of all, right? To admit you don't know something, right? And it also means that you're operating not out of fear for your ego, right, being bruised or damaged because you don't know something, because there's a lot we don't know. And there's a lot we will never know. And there's a lot that's unknowable, right? So it's okay not to know everything, because we never will, right? And as a consequence, I think we should become comfortable with that idea. And to become comfortable with that idea, and also to admit that you don't know something, shows resilience in your character, that you can openly admit something but use it as fuel to learn, to become educated, to have some discipline around that, so that you can cultivate your faculties, your knowledge base, so that you can get into a wiser state. And as teenagers, right? I remember as a teenager, you go through this phase where, and again, this is through my own experience and in my humble opinion, that once you hit those teenage years, you are now primed to, your primal self is now saying, okay, now I'm priming myself to go out and to hunt and to bring food in to survive. Okay. Therefore, I must be in a state of, I know what to do, because this is something that's compelling me to do that. Right. So you switch up all these gears. All of a sudden, you know everything. And I think that is a primal trigger that kicks off within us. The thing is, martial arts is very primal until you cultivate intelligence out of that. I think through that process, we have to learn how to develop the intelligence around that, because all of that's happening through our true primal selves, right? Our primal cause, whereas there is a higher intelligence that we can cultivate once we become aware of that. But that just takes an awareness first, right?
And the funny thing about that, Lex, is that, you're sharing, on one side, you got the I don't know, and the other side, you got I know everything kind of thing. And that's similar to the story you spoke about earlier on about having, when you were the optician, and the kind of view was, I know what I'm talking about. I don't know, let's just get you out of the door. So it's got its own like polarity to it as well, because if the person's gotten stuck on the I know it, they're not emptying their teacup to be able to take in more information as well. So it's kind of interesting that you got these two polarities, but then you got the polarities within the polarities as well, right? And that's right. What we're talking about in like being aware of those and being open to those ideas, and not closing yourself off to the situation, whichever way you're going, but keeping that open loop in there as well.
That 100% right. 100% right. And this is when you can start to cultivate that, what will happen is you'll start to learn not to operate through fear. You'll start to learn not to operate through the superficial avatars that we create. And these are, this is how I want to present myself to the world. In fact, how you present yourself to the world is all an illusion anyway, because your true essence, the true reality is how you are inside, how your spirit is, how that needs to convey and do what it needs to do within this existence we call life. Everything else is just a farce, right? Unless you're completely connected with that. So we have to try and learn to remove this illusory self, right? Which in Sanskrit is called Maya, right? Maya is an illusory self, right? Everything that we are physically, right, and the way we can project ourselves outwardly in general is an illusion. Okay, only until you completely in tune with your true, authentic high self will you be acting and expressing yourself authentically, right, through the core essence, through your spiritual essence, right? And that's when the true truth can be spoken, right? Everything else beyond that is just layers of personas, avatars, and so on. And the funny thing is, the word avatar is in the West, we use it to represent our personality, right?
And the movie in it.
Yeah, yeah, and the movie. But avatar comes from a Sanskrit word again called, which is actually avatar, right? Which
Avatar.
is, spell it that way, right? And avatar means your soul expressed in this individuated life. That's what it means. So how do you express yourself outwardly, right? Through what I call your original truth. How were you meant to, what were you meant to do within this lifetime, and how are you meant to express that? Is it a message? Is it some work, or is it holding space, or whatever it is that you need to do? Everything else is just egocentricity, right? Working its weird and wonderful ways. And we have to learn that, if we do not, take on this bamboo principle where we're able to change and be elastic in our thinkings, and change our mindset, change our ideas, change the perception of the world internally, externally, and so on, so that we can slowly whittle it down to who we really are. Guess what? You're always going to be living in an illusion, right? Your life is going to be insincere and incongruent to your higher self. Therefore, it is fake, right? That's what illusion means. Maya means it's an illusion. It's not real. It's fake, right? So there's this coinage of words, deep fake, right? Where, people superimpose, and there's software that superimpose somebody's face on somebody's body, usually doing some lewd act, right? To either incriminate them or to denigrate somebody or whatever. But, aren't we doing that to ourselves if we are so attached to our ego, right? We need to take on this bamboo principle, because that bamboo principle is teaching us, all right, we need to have this elasticity in our mindset, right? And this neuroplasticity is the way our synaptic connections and neuromuscular pathways are laying down within our brain and our body and our limbs and so on, are constantly changing and are constantly remapping themselves. So don't you want to remap and program yourself to be the best version of you? And to be the best version of you, you've got to be open to change it. You've got to be open to adapt. You've got to be open to upgrade this software right here. You take your mobile phone and you'll get an upgrade on it, right? Yeah, you'll upgrade it, because guess what? Some software's going to stop, some app's going to stop working because they need the latest upgrades, right? But when do you upgrade this? The upgrades here is about changing your mindset, changing the programs and the strategies and the methodologies, whatever you want to call it. I mean, there's probably 101 different words you can use to describe the programs, right? The strategies, right? Your limiting beliefs or whatever you want to call them, right? And change them, right? To be able to delete them and start afresh, right? Or to upgrade them, right? And we need to get into the habit of doing that. And Bamboo Principle is allowing us to do that. It's allowing us to do that. But guess what? It happens all the way from your martial movement, right? Where you got somebody aggressing, you got to yield. And you got, and they start to yield, you aggress. Okay. So you notice this dynamic interplay is happening, right? When you're in combat. But that combat's teaching us our mind is moving exactly the way physical combat moves, right? So if our mind's moving that way, then that is moving our spirit that way too, right? Because all of this movement is connected, because the common energy between that is our life force. That life force is moving. You don't want that life force to become stagnant, because when you knock heads, it stops. But when you flow with it, it keeps moving, and this energy is going to keep moving. Okay. And that's what you need to do, right? So there's various layers of understanding that are in play here, but ultimately it boils down to keeping an open mind and being able to adapt, grow, take on new ideas. And just to kind of add to that is if you disagree with somebody, it's okay to disagree with somebody. You can disagree with somebody without having an argument. You can disagree with somebody without having a fight. You can disagree with somebody and still be absolutely okay with it. It's how you say it, right? And it's learning these skills, right, on how to say it. And there's a chapter on Master Your Life, the first book I wrote, which goes into honestly express yourself, and it talks about being able to cultivate your human communication skills in order to be able to disagree with somebody and still maintain congruency and rapport and trust with the person you're talking to. But you disagree, and it's okay. And it's an art that you can learn, and anybody can do it. The younger we are, the more immature we are, where disagreeing with someone is seen as a threat because people don't know how to handle it. Well, actually, it's people don't know how to say it. And that's what it's really about. Okay. So the Bamboo Principle is again, as always, this podcast is about the martial way. How do you take a martial philosophy, a principle that can be applied to the body, mind, and spirit, and help cultivate you holistically, right? They're not separate from one another. They're all part of the whole. Okay, so we shouldn't separate that. We should try to realign that and to bring it all back together. And that's kind of what's going on here. So hopefully that makes sense. And hopefully that gives you a better understanding on the yin and yang aspects, because ultimately this talk is about yin and yang, right? Okay.
No, absolutely. I mean, it just reminded me of something when I used to do martial arts. One of my instructors once said to me, he said that you just got to bear in mind is wherever your head goes, your body is going to follow. So I thought, hang on a minute, that's true. If you're, wherever your head's going, your body's going to follow, isn't it? So, and if you base it on that as well, it's the same. Wherever your head is going, your thoughts, your emotions, everything's going to follow, right? So you are like a bamboo stick, because if you're standing on your feet and you're going side to side, you've got that flexibility with how you're doing it as well. So you are the bamboo stick as well at one stage, right?
Well, exactly, and that does kind of raise another very important key point. Where your head goes, your body goes, and on that same note, where your mind goes, your energy flows. Okay, or we can take that one step further. Where your focus goes, your energy flows. Okay,
exactly.
So there's a saying that says, where your yi goes, your chi flows. Yi means focus. Okay. in Chinese. Okay, so um, uh, this kind of also goes to, now we're starting to kind of now use the bamboo principle to say, okay, if your energy was on asserting, if your focus was asserting energy, and you've got another assertive opposing energy, now you need to yield. You need to put your focus in somewhere else. Okay, you need to withdraw that energy, so your focus needs to change. Okay, change that word again, right? So in order to change, as soon as that focus changes, right? In this case, all right, my focus is withdraw energy. The chi starts to move away. The energy starts to move away. Okay, but we can do that same thing on our state. Okay, for instance, let's just say, you're in a situation where you're having a negative outcome. Okay, you're putting loads of energy into something, you're having a negative outcome. Okay, well, change your focus onto what outcome you do want. Because if you're so fixated on the negative outcome and keep putting energy there, and the same results occurring, then aren't you wasting your energy? So why don't you focus your energy on something else? Okay, and if you change what you're doing, you've got a possibility of creating a different outcome, a different result. And therefore, we must learn to, and we're all guilty of doing this, and we must learn to become aware as quickly as possible if something is beneficial to you and your environment and your community and so on, or not. And if it is, then do more. If it isn't, then don't do it, or do less. Okay, so we need to become consciously aware of that, but we need to pick up on these things like that. Okay, because life situations are such that sometimes these moments happen in a millisecond, right? Let's just take combat, for instance, right? You need to get out of the way of a punch, right, quickly, or you're going to get smacked in the face. Okay, you're in a work situation and somebody's aggressed you with a question. Well, you either know the answer, you don't know the answer. How you respond is on you. So you might have a few seconds to respond to that, and how you do that will bear on your character and the way you handle yourself professionally at that moment in time. And you have to make sure you put your energy in the right place, your focus in the right place, the energy goes in that direction. So be mindful of that, and think about, I would say, my advice would be, think about what outcomes you want to achieve, and put your energy in that direction. And that way, it will slowly manifest and create. When you put your energy in a direction which you don't want to achieve, that will manifest and get bigger. So be careful what you're fueling. There's a beautiful Chinese proverb that talks about this, father telling her daughter, his daughter, a story about the two wolves, right? And the two wolves, and they're saying, one wolf is on one shoulder, and the wolf is creating a fear and negativity, and the other one is creating love and positivity. And she asks the father, she goes, so which wolf would you feed? And it's up to the individual, right? Which one you want to feed. Whichever one you feed is the one that's going to survive, and the one that's going to keep going. And you want to make sure that you don't lose that, right? That you stay focused on feeding the outcome that you want to achieve, rather than the one that's not serving you. and not serving others as well. So just something to keep in mind. The full story, if I can look it up, would be beneficial.
No, definitely. People might be asking. That's a really interesting point. Like another practical example of that is, for example, let's take the boxing ring for example. Right, you're going into the ring, and there's two ways. You know, if you take Muhammad Ali used to say, "I'm the greatest," you know, and you go in and he was visualizing on winning and actually be the last man standing. On the other side, you might have someone who goes into the situation thinking, "Oh, I hope I don't lose. I better not get hit. I better not do this, and this better not happen." And do you see the thinking in there? Because one person is thinking, they're both thinking on an outcome, right? Whereas person's seeing the end result, whereas the other person is focusing on the things they don't want. But those are the things that end up happening because that's where the energy is going, right? And it happens with everybody when, like, for example, you might be doing that with your bills. Yeah, you say, "Oh, I've got so many bills. I'm getting bills all the time and bills," and your focus is on the bills. It's like shift your attention to not be on the bills, right?
Yeah.
So, you know, so there's like these are the kind of things that we're saying become aware of. Focus on what you really want, not the things that you don't want, because the things you say you don't want are the things that are going to manifest, because that's where your energy is going and focus is going, and that's all your filters are thinking on, right?
I want to correct that story, the two wolves story, because it's actually a Cherokee tale, and if I can just read it, I've looked it up, and it goes: an old Cherokee is teaching his granddaughter or grandson about life, and he says, "A fight is going on inside me," he said to the child, and he said it's a terrible fight, and it's between two wolves. One is evil; he's angry, envious. He's sorrowed, he's got regret, greed, arrogance, self-pity, guilt, resentment, inferiority, lies, false pride, superiority, and ego. And he continues, he said, the other is good. He is joy, peace, love, hope, serenity, humility, kindness, benevolence, empathy, generosity, truth, compassion, and faith. The same fight is going on inside you and inside every other person too. And the grandchild thought about it for a minute and then asked his grandfather, "Well, which wolf will win?" And the old Cherokee simply replied, "The one you feed." And I think that is such a potent story, or little parable that I think really.
Wisdom bomb.
Yeah, it's a beautiful wisdom bomb, and just like a lot of the ancient Indian philosophies and principles, there's a lot that we can learn to make the world a better place. And just like that, it's just a matter of redirecting your yi and application of the chi in a different direction. So I guess the question is, which wolf are you feeding? And are you aware there are two wolves? Or are there more wolves?
Exactly.
So become aware of them. Because I think in the overall scheme of things, it's awareness that allows you to orientate yourself in the space. I think quite often we walk through life not being aware, being blind, and just cruising or drifting through life, and getting surprised by things that were always there, but we didn't notice them. And we have to learn to become aware. We have to learn to become conscious of these things that are having a direct impact on our lives and others' lives around us. And we can improve matters if we just decide to do a little bit of work, take ownership and responsibility for ourselves and others. Okay. We're all put in, we're all in it together. We are not separate from one another. Therefore, we have to be mindful of that. And that changes the way you have an outlook on life. And that outlook on life starts to improve once you become aware of things and you start to work on it. And then you'll have less surprises, and you can kind of or start to steer rather than drift aimlessly.
That's fantastic, Lex. I think there's lots of information in that. And before we sign out, do you want to do the honors and read out the chapter? As I say, hear it from the horse's mouth, or shall we say, in this case, hear it from the bamboo stick himself.
So there's the picture of the bamboo principle, which I forgot to show you guys earlier. Okay, so just a lovely picture of some unripe green bamboo. Okay, and this section reads as follows. The application of the principles of yin and yang in Kung Fu are expressed as the law of harmony, also known as the bamboo principle. The law of harmony states that one should be in harmony with, not in rebellion against, the force of the opposition. Okay, so I'm going to repeat that one again. The law of harmony states that one should be in harmony with, not in rebellion against, the force of the opposition. This means that one should do nothing that is not natural or spontaneous. The important thing is not to strain in any way. Bruce Lee said, "So neither gentleness nor firmness holds any more than one half of a broken whole, which, welded together, forms the true way of martial art. The tendency to guard against is from getting too firm and stiff. Notice that the stiffest tree is most easily cracked, while the bamboo or willow survives by bending with the wind. This is why a Kung Fu man is soft yet not yielding, firm yet not hard. The best example of Kung Fu is water. Water can penetrate the hardest granite because it is yielding. One cannot stab or strike at water and hurt it, because that which offers no resistance cannot be overcome." I'll repeat that last bit again. That which offers no resistance cannot be overcome. And I think, we should all strive not to offer resistance. Although, there is an instinctive self-defense mechanism that does kind of rise to the occasion if we don't cultivate that. So to close this off, it says, from a combat standpoint, Bruce Lee went on to say, "When the opponent expands, I contract. When he contracts, I expand."
Kapow! Oh, wow. Amazing. Thank you for sharing that, Lex. And I think we'll close on that note, and we'll see everybody on the next one. I hope you found that useful, and catch up soon.
Yeah, thank you so much, guys, and I hope you can take some value and some positive inspiration from this. And if you have, then please share it with your family and friends and loved ones, and let's try and spread this this ripple of consciousness across the world, and help make the world a better place to live in by raising human consciousness and realigning ourselves to our true high self. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much.